The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for over 1,000 years. They believed themselves to be the center of civilization, the voice of order in a chaotic galaxy. To them, humanity was nothing more than a young, insignificant race, one that had been allowed into the galactic community out of pity, not respect. For years, the humans had obeyed the Council's laws. They paid their taxes, followed the rules, and accepted the lesser role assigned to them. But when humans started rising in power, when their technology and influence grew beyond what the Council expected, jealousy and fear took root. The Council decided it was time to remind Earth of its place, and that was the mistake that would seal their fate. The diplomat's plea. On the capital world of the Galactic Council, a lone human stood before the High Tribunal. His name was Ambassador Daniel Reeves, one of Earth's most respected diplomats. He had been sent with a simple mission: to prevent war. Humanity had always chosen diplomacy first. They believed in peace, but peace had limits. Members of the Council, Reeves spoke, his voice calm yet firm. Humanity has honored our agreements. We have never acted against the interests of the galaxy. Yet, without warning, you have sanctioned attacks on our colonies, restricted our trade, and labeled us as a threat. We ask, no, we demand, an explanation. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then, laughter filled the hall. A tall, reptilian alien, Overlord Vadazur, leaned forward. His yellow eyes gleamed with amusement. Demand, he sneered. You dare demand anything from us, human? Reeves held his ground. We are not asking for special treatment. We are asking for fairness. Humanity has done nothing to deserve this hostility. Vazir scoffed. Fairness? You humans spread across the stars like a disease. You do not belong among us. Your kind is reckless, violent, unpredictable. The Council agrees. Earth must be controlled before it becomes a real problem. The ambassador's hands clenched at his sides. He had expected resistance. But this was worse. I urge you to reconsider, he said, his voice steady. You are making a mistake. Vazir's lips curled into a cruel smile. We already have. The execution. Hours later, the galaxy watched in horror as the Council broadcasted a live execution. Ambassador Reeves was dragged into the city square, bound and beaten. A crowd of Council officials and citizens gathered, their faces filled with either amusement or indifference. A towering insect-like alien, Magistrate Tuvrak, stepped forward. His voice boomed across the broadcast. This human came to threaten the Council with war. He came with arrogance, demanding respect that his kind does not deserve. Let this be a lesson to all who defy the rightful rulers of this galaxy. Reeves lifted his head, his eyes burning with defiance. He did not beg. He did not plead. He only spoke 6 words. You will regret this very soon. Then the flames rose, and Earth watched their diplomat burn. The silence before the storm. For the first time in history, humanity did not respond immediately. There was no declaration of war, no threats, no retaliation, just silence. Days passed, then weeks. The Council mocked Earth's lack of action. They expected protests, maybe an attempt at negotiations. But there was nothing. Then, one by one, Council ships began to disappear. At first, it was dismissed as technical failures. Then entire space stations went dark. Colonies found themselves abandoned overnight, their inhabitants missing without a trace. Whispers spread. Fear took root. Something was coming, and the Council had no idea what they had unleashed. The Galactic Council had made its decision. They had burned a human diplomat alive and broadcasted it for the entire galaxy to see. They had expected a reaction. Anger, protests, maybe even weak retaliation. But instead, humanity went silent. No warships, no threats, no messages. At first, the Council laughed. They assumed Earth had accepted defeat, that humanity had been too weak to fight back. But as the days passed, the laughter faded. something was wrong. The first disappearances. A week after the execution, a council supply ship traveling near the outer colonies vanished. No distress signal, no wreckage, no signs of an attack. The council dismissed it as an accident. Space travel was dangerous, after all. Then, another ship disappeared, and another. Entire fleets began going silent, without any explanation. Admiral Juvok, a veteran strategist of the Council's military, demanded answers. He personally sent a patrol to investigate one of the lost fleet's last known locations. The patrol never returned. Fear began creeping into the Council chambers. What is happening? Overlord Vadazur growled during an emergency meeting. Have the humans finally decided to fight? Magistrate Tovrak, the one who had ordered the diplomat's execution, scoffed. If they wanted war, they would have attacked us directly. This is nothing more than cowardice. But then, the reports got worse. Entire colonies go dark. The Council ruled over hundreds of planets. Some were military strongholds, others trade hubs. The humans, despite being treated as lesser beings, had trading posts and small colonies spread across different sectors. One by one, those colonies vanished. The planets weren't attacked. There were no craters, no signs of orbital bombardment. There were no distress calls. The people were just gone. Elite investigation teams were sent to these locations. What they found made their blood run cold. Ships were still docked. Meals were half-eaten on tables. Tools were left on the ground, as if the workers had simply disappeared mid-task. It was as if every human had simply ceased to exist. The message left behind. Then, on one abandoned colony, the investigation team found something new. A single transmission had been left behind, repeating over and over. When they played it, a chilling voice filled the room. It was the last words of Ambassador Reeves. "You will regret this very soon." The room fell silent. The council officials stared at one another, their faces pale with fear. This was no accident, no technical failure. This was humanity's response. The failed counterattack. Desperate to regain control, the Council deployed their grand fleet. Hundreds of warships spread across the galaxy, searching for any signs of Earth's forces. But there was nothing to find. Earth's home system was empty. No human warships, no transmissions. Even their colonies that had once been filled with life were now desolate. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy, and that terrified the Council more than war ever could. For war was predictable. War followed rules. But this was something else entirely. Something that none of them were ready for. The Galactic Council had ruled for centuries through strength and control. When they executed the human diplomat, they expected a war. What they got instead was fear. Humanity had vanished. No fleets, no transmissions, no retaliation. But something was happening in the dark, something they couldn't explain. And then, the first strike came. The disappearance of Helios 7. Helios 7 was a heavily fortified council world. It wasn't just a military base. It was a symbol of power. Dozens of warships, planetary shields, and over 10 million inhabitants. If humanity wanted to fight, this was a world they would never touch. Or so the council believed. One night, without warning, Helios 7 went silent. No distress calls. No signs of battle. The planet just vanished from all communications. Admiral Juvok personally led a fleet to investigate. When they arrived, what they found was impossible. The planet was still there, but it was dead. The cities were empty. The streets were filled with abandoned vehicles, weapons dropped mid-action. The warships in orbit were intact, but lifeless. Every single living being, soldiers, civilians, even the animals, were gone. There were no signs of struggle, no bodies, no destruction, just emptiness. The council panics. Panic spread through the council. Helios 7 was one of their strongest planets. If humanity could do this without firing a single shot, what else were they capable of? This is not possible. Overlord Vodazur roared in the council chambers. There is no human technology that can do this. Magistrate Tovrak, the one who had ordered the human diplomat's execution, was beginning to sweat. This is a trick, a deception. But deep down, they all knew the truth. This was humanity. The silence, the disappearances, the psychological terror. This was not war. This was something worse. The message left behind. As the Council fleet searched Helios 7 for clues, they found one thing. In the center of the abandoned capital city, on the main government building, 5 words were burned into the stone. We are already among you. The moment this message was broadcasted, the entire council fell into chaos. If humans were already inside their worlds, inside their cities, then nowhere was safe. The desperate response. In pure desperation, the council declared a galaxy-wide lockdown. Every planet, every station, every fleet was placed under heavy security. No ships were allowed to travel without approval. All military forces were put on high alert. Any non-council species were suspected as human spies. It was the largest defensive operation in the history of the council. But it didn't matter, because humanity was already inside their walls. They had been watching, waiting. And this was only the beginning. The council had locked down the entire galaxy. Every planet was under heavy surveillance. Every ship was monitored, and every alien species was treated with suspicion. But it didn't help. Humanity was still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting, and the council was running out of time. Paranoia spreads. Fear gripped the highest levels of the Galactic Council. Helios 7 had been erased without a single battle. An entire planet, gone, and the only message left behind was a warning. We are already among you. No one knew what it meant. Had humans infiltrated their government, their military? Could they even trust their own officers? Magistrate Tovrak, the very alien who had sentenced the human diplomat to death, was now afraid to sleep. He had once laughed at humanity. Now, every shadow in his chamber, every flicker of movement, sent his heart racing. He was not the only one. Across the council, high-ranking officials started vanishing. Some disappeared from their homes. Others were found dead in their offices. No signs of struggle, no security alerts. It was as if the humans were moving like ghosts. The investigation begins. Admiral Juvok, the Council's greatest military strategist, was ordered to find out how humanity was doing this. He didn't trust the Council politicians. He believed in facts and logic. Humans are not gods, he told his officers. They cannot just make people disappear without a trace. There has to be an explanation. So he ordered an elite investigation team to search Helios 7 again. This time, they found something. Deep beneath the surface, inside an abandoned military base, they uncovered security footage. What they saw shook them to their core. The footage. The video was from the night Helios 7 went silent. The cameras inside the base showed normal activity. Soldiers, scientists, workers. Everything seemed fine. Then, something changed. One by one, people started looking around, as if they had heard something. But there was no sound. Then their faces twisted in horror. They turned to run, but it was already too late. Something invisible moved through the base. The soldiers fired their weapons at the empty air, but their shots hit nothing. Then, they were gone. The footage ended. Admiral Juvok stared at the screen, his claws tightening. This was not normal warfare. This was something else. Something far worse. The terrifying realization. Juvok ordered a full scan of the facility, looking for any sign of human activity. They found nothing. But then, the scanners picked up something disturbing. The entire base, every room, every hallway, every surface, was covered in microscopic human nanotech. It had been there the whole time. Undetected, watching, learning. The truth hit him like a hammer. Humanity hadn't just vanished. They had evolved. They weren't fighting with ships or guns. They were already inside every council system, every world, every fleet. The war wasn't coming. It had already begun, and the council had already lost. The Galactic Council had ruled for centuries. They had crushed rebellions, conquered entire civilizations, and imposed their will across the stars. But now, they were facing something they couldn't understand. Humanity wasn't fighting with fleets or armies. They had already infiltrated the council. They were moving unseen, striking without warning. And now, the real fall was about to begin. The capital under siege, the council's homeworld, Zyphorax Prime, was the most secure planet in the galaxy. It was protected by massive defense grids, planetary shields, and an entire armada in orbit. Nothing could breach its defenses. And yet, it was already under attack. The first sign came from the planetary network. One by one, the automated security systems began shutting down. City-wide defenses, surveillance cameras, even the emergency alarms, all offline. The technicians scrambled to fix the systems, but the moment they did, a single message appeared on every screen across the planet. Your time is up. Then the lights went out. The vanishing army. Admiral Juvok had already warned the council. Humanity is inside our systems. We need to evacuate immediately. But the politicians refused to listen. They still believed they were safe. Then, the soldiers began disappearing. It started inside the capital's barracks. One squad went in for a patrol. They never came out. No gunfire, no screams, just silence. Then, another group. And another. Entire battalions, fully armed and armored, vanished without a trace. Panic spread through the capital. The remaining soldiers began turning on one another, suspecting human infiltrators among them. The council's greatest army was crumbling without a single battle. The fall of Magistrate Tavrak. Magistrate Tavrak, the alien who had ordered the human diplomat's execution, was now a prisoner in his own palace. He had once stood tall, mocking humanity, calling them weak. Now he was locked inside his chamber, trembling. He had tripled his personal guards. He had sealed every door, activated every security system. But he knew it wouldn't matter. They were coming for him. The air in the room felt heavy. The shadows in the corners seemed darker. Then he heard the whisper. "Did you think we forgot?" Tavrak spun around, his breathing ragged. The room was empty. He stumbled backward, reaching for his communicator. No signal. The whisper came again, closer this time. "We remember everything." Tavrak screamed. And then, he was gone. The guards outside heard nothing. The security cameras showed nothing. When they finally broke into the chamber, there was no trace of him. Only one thing remained. A single message, carved into the metal wall. "This is justice. The council's last stand." With Tavrak gone, the rest of the council descended into chaos. The overlords, the senators, the high-ranking officials, all knew they were next. They tried to escape. It was already too late. The spaceports were disabled. Every emergency transport was sabotage. Their own fleet, the most powerful warships in the galaxy, was now under human control. Overlord Vatazur, the leader of the council, stood in the Grand Hall, surrounded by terrified officials. He knew this was the end. He turned to Admiral Juvok, his last remaining commander. "How do we stop them?" Vatazur demanded. Juvok's expression was grim. "We can't." At that moment, the palace doors creaked open. A wave of cold air rushed in. And then, they stepped inside. Humanity had arrived, and the council's fate was sealed. The great halls of the Galactic Council had once been filled with arrogance and power. Now, they were filled with fear. The council's leaders, once the rulers of the galaxy, now huddled together like prey. Their fleets were useless. Their armies had vanished. Their strongest defenses had been reduced to nothing. And now, humanity had arrived. The doors to the council chamber stood wide open. A cold silence filled the air. The aliens inside held their breath, waiting, praying for mercy. But no mercy was coming. The arrival of the unknown. Overlord Vatazur, the highest authority in the galaxy, had never felt powerless. Until now. His trembling eyes focused on the figures stepping into the chamber. They were human, but they were not soldiers. No heavy armor, no weapons. They wore simple, black uniforms. Their faces showed no emotion. They did not speak. They simply walked forward. It was then that Vatazur realized something even more terrifying. The humans weren't afraid. They stood in the heart of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and they did not see an enemy. They saw an execution waiting to happen. The trial without words. One by one, the humans walked past the terrified council members. They did not attack. They did not shout. They simply looked at them. And one by one, the aliens began to disappear. The first was a senator from the HFY Dominion. He gasped, his body flickered, and then he was gone. No scream, no struggle. The next was a general, one of the strongest warriors of the council. He tried to run, but his body faded into nothing. It was as if they had never existed. The rest of the council collapsed in terror. Please, one of them begged. We surrender. We accept peace. The humans did not respond, because there was no peace. Not anymore. The last words of a dying empire. Overlord Vatazur fell to his knees. He had ordered the execution of the human diplomat. He had laughed as the flames burned. Now, as the final human stepped toward him, he felt the weight of his crimes. "You," he whispered, "what are you?" For the first time, a human spoke. A single voice. Cold. Final. "We are the consequence." Vatazur closed his eyes. And then, he was gone. Erased from history. The Galactic Council was no more. Their names, their history, their planets, all erased. There was no grand battle, no final war. Only silence. The Council had believed themselves untouchable. They had ruled through fear and strength. But when they burned a human alive, they had made a fatal mistake, because humanity did not forget. And they never forgave. The Galactic Council was gone, not defeated, not conquered, erased. Their leaders had vanished. Their records had been wiped. Their monuments and cities, once symbols of power, now stood silent and abandoned. It was as if the Council had never existed. But the galaxy remained. Billions of species, millions of civilizations, all waiting to see what would happen next. For centuries, they had feared the Council. Now, they feared something far worse. Humanity. The silence after the storm. Across the galaxy, transmissions from the Council's homeworld had gone silent. No distress signals, no emergency calls, nothing. Planets that had once trembled under the Council's rule now whispered the same question. Who rules us now? The answer came in a single broadcast. A black screen. A voice. Cold, calm, final. The Council is no more. That was it. No threats, no demands, no declaration of conquest. And that was what terrified them the most, because it meant humanity had no interest in ruling. They had done what no species had ever dared. They had struck down the rulers of the galaxy and simply walked away. The gathering of the survivors. On the neutral world of Elithis IV, the remaining leaders of the galaxy gathered. Kings, warlords, presidents, all desperate to understand what had happened. The Council had been their enemy, but it had also kept order. Now, with no rulers, no structure, chaos threatened to spread. Some whispered about taking power for themselves. Others spoke of forming a new empire. And then, the humans arrived. They did not come in warships. They came alone. A single representative, dressed in black, expressionless. The room fell silent. One of the alien rulers, a warlord from the HFY Dominion, dared to speak. "What happens now?" he asked. His voice was careful, fearful. The human looked at him for a long moment. Then they answered, "That is up to you. A galaxy without masters." The aliens expected demands. They expected conditions. They expected humanity to take the throne. But humanity did not want power. They had not destroyed the council for conquest. They had destroyed it for justice. And now, the galaxy had a choice. Would they learn? Would they build something new? Or would they fall into the same mistakes? The human gave no warnings, no second chances. Only one message: do not make us return. Then they left. And across the stars, every ruler, every species, every world understood. Humanity did not rule, but they watched. And if the galaxy ever repeated the Council's crimes, they would return. And this time, there would be no survivors. The legacy of wrath. The story of the Council's fall spread across the stars. A warning, a legend, a shadow. For the first time in history, the galaxy was truly free. And for the first time, they knew what true fear was. Humanity had erased an empire. And now, the galaxy would never forget.